So Todd, tell us about your World Series so far.
Well, so far this year in the World Series, I have a 10th place cash. It was kind of disappointing. I had almost made the televised final table in the 1K no limit with rebuys. Didn't even rebuy. Just was in for $1,000, and an ace on the river knocked out my queen, so I went out 10th.
It wasn't Barry Greenstein, was it?
No. But it was the ace of spades, just like on the cover of his book. So I thought of that as I was walking away. But anyway, this year in the World Series, actually something that's more in my mind than the 10th place finish was the situation that I had to deal with, and 650 other people had to deal with, on Thursday, was it June 15th, the 2000 No Limit event. They forced, as I said, 65 tables, 650 people, to play in a 100-degree tent, which they call the pavilion, right behind the main room. It was 105 degrees that day outside. I don't know if the air conditioning just wasn't sufficient in that tent, or if it just wasn't working right. Well, whatever it was, obviously when they're setting up hours beforehand, they knew it was really, really hot in there. I know the floormen complained to the tournament director. I know the dealers complained before any players got in there. And for some reason, they still felt it was appropriate to run cash games. And not just cash games, but actually some low-limit cash games, which I guess it doesn't really matter what the limits are. They just shouldn't be running cash games, period. But imagine you walk in, you think that you're playing in the main room, you're dressed warm, like I am right now.
Amazon room.
Yeah, to play in the Amazon room, which is always over air-conditioned and always very cool. So you dress like this, you come into the Amazon room, you're assigned to table 160, you walk up to table 160, and there's like a $5, $10 game running at your table, and they direct you outside to the pavilion, where it's nearly 100 degrees, and you're dressed like this.
And they didn't tell you beforehand that this might be a possibility if you enter this event?
No, they told you nothing. So you show up there, you have no idea this could possibly happen, this just blindsides you. You go into the pavilion dressed like you're going to sit in a place that's 65 degrees, and it's near 100 in there. And at this point, you have no choice. You've got to sit down and play. You've already paid for the tournament. And people were so miserable in there. The dealers were miserable. The floormen were miserable. The players were miserable. Nobody can concentrate. A lot of players at my table were actually saying they envied those who were busting out. And they weren't joking. They were actually, they'd hear someone's busted, and they'd say, wow, that guy's lucky.
To get back into the air conditioning?
Yeah, and truthfully, I ran my stack up to 11K pretty early from starting chips of 4K. And I'll admit, I didn't play that well after that. I threw away a lot of chips, and when I thought about it afterwards, I said, you know what? I was just trying to play a lot of hands, not consciously, but kind of subconsciously to get my mind off the heat. And at one point, I thought I was going to be out of the whole nightmare. My table broke, and they said, okay, you're moving. I'm like, okay, thank God. They moved me to another table that was even hotter, near the door, farthest away from any air conditioner, and that's where I ended up, and that's where I lost all my chips. And I heard a lot of people, including well-known poker pros, saying that they intentionally made stupid moves and threw away their chips, so they'd either chip up big or go out. They just couldn't stand the long haul in that room. And while this is all going on, still cash games running. They didn't shut down any cash games. They didn't attempt to get people out of that room until people just naturally busted out of there and got moved to other tables.
How many hours did some players have to stay out there?
Oh, it had to be very many, because I was in there for 4 hours and the room was still more than half full. It was just amazing they could do that. So when I busted out, I was so mad. I was so mad at Harris that they could have put me into that situation after I spent $2,000 of my hard-earned dollars to play in this tournament, that they put me in such substandard conditions. And that they'd run cash games at the same time, that they have such greed that they want to rake these cash games that they can't stop them when the conditions in the pavilion are so bad.
So you feel like they should have either stopped those cash games or made the cash game players play outside, since this is what is attracting so many players, it is the World Series of Poker bracelets.
Exactly. So what happened, I went actually to Jack Effel, who is the, I don't know what his exact title is, I think he's the tournament director, or at least he's the one who made that decision. I went in there and I said, who made this decision to put us in the pavilion today? And they directed me to Jack Effel. I went to Jack Effel and said, what could have possibly made you make this decision? What could have possibly been in your mind as you said, I'm going to keep running these cash games and put the World Series players back in a 100-degree pavilion? Why don't you stop the cash games? Why don't you stop the satellites? Why don't you not let these things run and make sure that all the people who paid for the $2,000 World Series No Limit event are comfortable? And he said, we're trying to accommodate everyone. And I said, accommodate everyone? How can you accommodate cash game players and satellite players? They've got to be second priority. You cannot run these things until there are open tables for them. You should have every single table filled in that room with World Series event players before you move anyone to that pavilion. Not one table should run in the pavilion with a World Series tournament until every single Amazon room table is filled. And he didn't agree with me. He told me that they're trying to accommodate everyone. Some people come wanting to play cash. Some people come wanting to play satellites. And hey, I understand that everybody has different priorities, but that's not what the World Series is for. The World Series is to play bracelet events. Those should take priority. And in fact, on some days they do take priority. Some days, like those $1,500 events, a lot of them have like near 3,000 players. They shut down the cash games on those days. So for some reason, they're not accommodating them on those days. The reason they accommodated them on Friday was because they physically had the space to give everyone a seat, regardless of how uncomfortable it was for certain people in those seats. So the next day, it seemed like they fixed it and they stopped the cash games and they finally took action. But that's only after tons and tons of people complained and after all of us who paid $2,000 to be in the event didn't get to play our best, didn't get to play under appropriate conditions, and we won't get that back. So,
yeah.
I mean, and the worst thing is, they actually did this after they already had a fiasco with the tent the week before. This was not the first problem with the tent.
What was the problem with the tent the first
A
time?
week before, now this didn't affect me personally because I was not in this tournament, but I believe it was like a 5 p.m. Omaha tournament. I think it was on June 5th. Horrible winds outside. It was not hot that day, but it was like 50-mile-per-hour winds outside.
Actually, Jeff Madsen stopped by and he said something about it. He said
Yeah.
that he was actually scared.
Yes. This is probably worse than my situation. I'm just not complaining as much because I wasn't part of it. But that doesn't take away from what the situation actually was. They put everyone in that tournament in the pavilion. Again, cash games were running. Again, they would have had plenty of tables for them if they closed the cash games and satellites. Instead, they put them in the pavilion with the 50-mile-per-hour winds. It sounded like you were in the middle of a hurricane. It was that loud. So you couldn't hear yourself think in there. And then the tent was shaking. People started becoming afraid that it was going to blow down. And in fact, part of it did blow down. As far as I know, nobody got hurt from it. But part of it did collapse from this, and they said, okay, this isn't safe anymore, and they moved everyone out of there. And then they magically came up with a space inside. So
Was it in the Amazon room?
Were
the extra space when they moved?
I don't know exactly where they came up with the space, but I know they stopped the tournament when the tent was damaged from the wind and decided it wasn't safe. And somehow they found room for everybody elsewhere. So, I mean, the fact that they could even try to play like that and still run the cash games. I mean, how can they do this? They walk in there, they're setting up, they hear the wind is going, and you cannot hear yourself think. I mean, think of just super heavy wind blowing through like small spaces in the tent, just how that must sound. And trying to play
distracting.
how distracting it must be, and trying to play a World Series tournament under those conditions when these $5, $10 players are inside in the nice quiet room with the air conditioning and everything like that, just so Harris can get the extra, whatever, $4 a hand they get out of those players. They've got to decide what their priorities are. They've got to say, we're going to make sure that this World Series is run properly, and the absolute number one priority is to make sure that people playing these events that we've scheduled play under appropriate conditions. And they did not do that. And even if they fix things now, it's too late. There's been too many events that have been played in conditions that should have never arisen in the first place. And we're paying a lot of money off the top. 9%, 10% in some cases, I believe, and that's what we're getting for it. And they're not saying, okay, we'll refund your entry fees. And when I say entry fees, I mean like the whatever percent off the top they're taking. They don't refund any of that. They don't give you anything. It's just, well, tough luck, but we'll try better next time.
Is there anything else about the World Series that you've had trouble with?
Yeah, there actually is. I'm sure that everybody watching this already knows by now, but the lines were just out of hand. And what floored me was not so much the second day, or should I say the first day, where you come in, the lines are like 4 to 6 hours. The day before, May 31st, the day before the whole thing started, where you think that they're going to have a lot of cashiers open to take people who want to buy in for all the upcoming events, including the one starting the next day. There's actually two starting the next day, the dealers event and the 5K mixed event. So I went down there on May 31st, and all the cashiers in the World Series Amazon room were closed. And I'm like, well, how do you buy in? Well, I'm directed to the main cashier, where there is one cashier the whole night taking buy-ins. One cashier for all the people who want to buy into the World Series the night before. And I thought to myself again, who could have possibly made this decision? Who said, oh, this is a good idea. We're going to have one cashier handling all the World Series buy-ins, and it's not just coming up and dropping your cash and getting signed up. You've got to sign all these release forms. It takes a long time for each person on the very first event you play. So the night before, they put one cashier. So, as a result, of course, the lines were again 4 to 6 hours, and a lot of people just did not buy in the night before because of that reason, expecting all the cashiers to be open the next day, which compounded the problem the next day, when the cashiers were open, because a lot of people who would have bought in the night before are now there on that day. And I guess they had some problems with the kiosks and the computers, so that made those lines even longer. I mean, it's just one screw up after another. And it kind of, the sad thing about the playing cards, the whole controversy with the cards, that was a mistake. You know, that was a bad decision. They should have been more careful before redesigning the cards and made sure everyone was okay with it, not just a few people they kind of casually show them to. But unfortunately, that took the focus off a lot of the bigger problems. When people think of this World Series, they'll think probably more of the playing cards. Right. And that's not really the biggest issue. The biggest issue is having to stand online for 4 to 6 hours. The biggest issue is being put in a tent that's dangerous and about to blow down. The biggest issue is a week later still being put in the tent when it's 100 degrees in there while they greedily run cash games. Those are the big issues. Those are the things that should never happen. And they've got to hire experienced people who know how to avoid these problems that are coming up. They shouldn't be learning on the job and fixing these things as they happen. The World Series has been running in the Rio for 3 years now. The Rio has been, the World Series has been pretty much the same every year. They've changed events around, but logistically it's been the same. They should totally have it down pat by now. But instead of getting better every year, it gets worse. And I just don't understand it. And I don't understand when I come to complain about it. I don't understand when I go to Jack Effel and say, why did you do this? Instead of being told, yeah, we messed up, yeah, we're sorry, yeah, we're going to fix this. I'm given excuses. And I'm trying to, and I'm almost being told that I'm wrong. And that 650 players in there, and all the dealers and floormen are wrong. And I've just been very disappointed at how things have been run so far. And I just really hope that someone in Harrah's higher up takes note of this and makes the appropriate changes in who's managing things. So next year we have a good series that is not totally just messed up in every way, shape, or form.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure a lot of players feel the same way you do, as, you know, players want at least their safety and their comfortableness, and, you know, like playing in these big events to be their first priority, which, you know, a lot of players feel Harrah's don't have their interests in mind. So this is probably a very good step into getting things changed, and I really appreciate you stopping by, and good luck with the rest of the series.
Thank you very much.